Welcome to Doc NYC Spring Showcase. I'm Kim Garcia, Associate Features Programmer for Doc NYC. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hulu, and thank all of you for watching Taste the Nation Holiday Edition with Padma Lakshmi. Today we have Padma joining us to discuss the new edition of her show. Hi, Padma.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. I just want to say, it's fantastic what you did with the holiday edition, covering Hanukkah, Noche Buena, Salal, and also discussing the myth of Thanksgiving. And I wondered, in terms of the holiday edition, how did you make the decision to highlight those specifically this edition?
I think, because of COVID, we were unable to do a full season. We're actually in production now doing a full season. But at the time last summer, it just still was a little iffy about going out there. And we wanted to do a few episodes. And since we thought we could get them out during holiday time, we thought, well, how can we make this little vignette of episodes feel special, even though it's not like a 10 episode season. And so, because they were coming out during the holidays, we thought it would be nice to tie into the holidays so that, people are celebrating and then they can see how others celebrate. And it just seemed germane to what was happening in people's lives at the time. Obviously in the case of the Jewish episode, Hanukkah is a minor holiday compared to, say, Passover or Yom Kippur, but it's what was happening at the time the episode was coming out. And so, we also thought it was a good way to talk about some cultural aspects of this community in America that we wanted to talk about, specifically that Christmas is also going on. And so Hanukkah is a way for people to be able to celebrate something in their own culture. And so we decided to go with Hanukkah.
Great, thank you. I mean, and with that, it's, seeing the Hanukkah edition and it being in New York and covering Lower East Side, and, you see Russ and Daughters, Pickle Guys, all these great locations. And, the same with all of the other episodes in this edition. How do you make that tough choice of who to highlight?
It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, I have a couple of field producers that work on every episode. And so they do the initial digging, we tell them what the thesis is, and then they kind of beat the bushes and see what stories they find. And, if I have particular people or places that I know I want to go to, I will tell them, listen, I want you to go check out Russ and Daughters. I want you to go check out the Tenement Museum, because also, I live in that neighborhood, so I know it well, and I'm a New Yorker, so I have very strong opinions about, some of these episodes. So on that one, I knew I wanted to go to Russ and Daughters. I knew I wanted to find, certain participants who could talk about an aspect of the culture we were trying to cover. It's very difficult because, these are half an hour episodes. Some of them run a few minutes longer, but they're mostly half an hour. And it's hard to cram as much as we try to cram in them.
Yeah, I mean, going off that point, I have to say, seeing 35 minutes and how much you cover, I mean, from showcasing different people, their stories, giving historical context to that culture, and then also doing your own cooking and learning a recipe of that culture is pretty phenomenal. And what is the filming process like for that?
It's hard. I mean, we do a lot of research, and, it's very difficult because I always want to get as much as I can get in, as I said, but also one of the things that's difficult is that after you've filmed with all these people, the process is we do a lot of research until we get a treatment that we feel is strong with participants that, hopefully are not duplicating what the other one is saying, but giving us another facet of that community. But what you don't want to do is film with somebody and then not use the material, because that's very upsetting to that person. And it's only happened once in the history of the show. And I feel sick about it because, this person is giving us their time. But then you have to look at what story you're telling. And sometimes it's more prudent to make those very difficult decisions. But I usually go and I embed myself in a community for a week. We shoot there and we, do as many stories as we can. And then we're also doing B-roll, in the community and trying to get just sort of a sense of place. I always want the show to feel incredibly intimate and as deep and profound as possible in the short time that I have with my participants. But at the same time, I also want the show to feel very expansive so that you do see the diversity, not only of people, but also landscape and topography that is America. Alaska looks different from Arizona, which looks different from Carolina, which looks different from the Pacific Northwest. So for me, it was important to show the vastness also of the land of this country.
I mean, and you see that there's so much, noting it, just like the rich coverage, just, whether it's like drone shots where you see overhead, the landscape, the cityscape, it's really beautiful to see. But I kind of want to touch on the intimate point, because that's something I really noticed with you and the different people that are on the show, is that deep intimacy. I mean, you're talking about very heavy and personal stories of whether it's their own immigration story, whether it's been their own saying goodbye to their homeland, and also just racism and other heavy topics that they've encountered. And how do you create that space? And how do you also, I think in documentary, we're talking about how do we safely get them out of that space too?
It's really hard. And, I'm not somebody who's done a lot of interviews before Taste the Nation. Honestly, I've maybe done a book festival here or the 92nd Street Y or something like that. I can count on one hand the amount of interviews I've done. So each interview is different. Each person comes with their own quirks and strengths and anxieties, and I have to kind of suss them out. I try to remember all of the things that I've felt after many interviews that I've done across a 20-year career. And it's important for me that the participant feel comfortable enough to tell their story as they see fit. I ask them questions, I will shape it in the edit, because, we interview these people for 2 hours and then we use like 5 minutes, and, because the show is 30 minutes and I'm there all the week, the whole week. So you can kind of do the math there. And it's hard, sometimes people are very talkative on the phone with your researcher or your producer, but they're not with you. And then sometimes you're surprised, and the opposite is true. I've had producers say he's very cantankerous. He will end the interview, on a dime if he's unhappy. So just be careful or whatever. And then I get there and he's completely different with me, or a mother will say, yes, I'm fine with this, this, and this. And then on the day they'll say, you know what? No, I don't want you guys in my house. I don't, so you have to be nimble, and you have to be able to be flexible and work with things. There's no point in arguing or trying to convince a participant of something that's different than what they believe. You just always have to say yes, because you're at their disposal. You're at their disposal, right? We don't pay our participants. We try and be respectful of the environments we're in, but at the end of the day, the participants really lead. And then we take that footage and we shape it as best we can. But I'm asking a lot of my participants. I'm asking them to share their lives, very painful, traumatic experiences that they've gone through that they don't really want to think about on a daily basis. And I'm asking them to do that while a camera or two is sticking right, in their face. So I always try and remember I'm a guest in their home or restaurant or their time. I'm also taking up their time. And I also talk to them alone before cameras ever roll or we're mic'd. And I try to give them an opportunity in privacy to ask me any question that they want to ask me, because that's important too. I am used to being in front of the camera been on television since 1997. And even I get really nervous when I have a room full of people, just staring at me. So I try to remember what that feels like. And it's very easy for me to remember. And so I want to be sure that I'm being empathetic to their needs, because if they're comfortable, the interview will be better. It doesn't matter if I convince them of some point I'm trying to make about how much cooler it'll be if we're in their living room. It doesn't matter. What matters is what they're saying, what they're sharing with us. And if they feel more comfortable in a park bench or in the backseat of their car, that is where we're going, because that's what's important to me.
I mean, it's incredible because I feel like it really does show on camera just to see those beautiful stories shared. And, I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, I really had to learn on the job, and I just had to use my instincts, because a lot of these people are not media trained. They're not camera ready. They've never done this before. It's easier now because with the holiday edition, I did have a whole season to show them. I could direct them to season 1 so they could see exactly what the tone of the show is. And I'm not really out to get anyone, that's not the kind of show this is. I'm not a journalist. I don't want to be. It's an editorial show. I don't make any, I don't try to minimize that. This is my worldview of the show. It's idiosyncratic, it's subjective, and it will always be that way, So my aim is to use the platform that I have and give it to other people to highlight their stories. I'm known for who I am because I've been on TV for a long time, but there are so many interesting stories out there. I personally believe everybody has an interesting story. The halal guy, inside the truck on the corner on my street, my daughter's pediatrician, the lady doing my nails. Every single human being on this planet has an interesting story. It just matters whether what matters is whether you're willing to listen and how you tell that story, and that's what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to just get them to tell their version of their lived stories.
And thank you. I mean, going further into that, I just want to talk about the episode with the Wampanoag Nation community and going into the myth of Thanksgiving, and going back to the first season, you had already covered other indigenous communities in New Mexico, or what we call New Mexico, and then going to the Wampanoag
in Arizona
community.
At the San Marcos.
Oh, yeah. Arizona. My apologies.
That's okay.
And then with this, it was, really covering the indigenous community, Wampanoag, who, are the descendants of where pilgrims came, and kind of like really getting into some heavy conversations and really having a lot of, viewers have to confront like, what is their relationship to Thanksgiving? And I wondered how you went through that process of, covering their story and their experience, and also just taking some bold moves of like discussing, National Day of Mourning and these other very, I would say, pieces, complicated pieces of Thanksgiving that can be like very difficult for mainstream, conversation. So
it's hard because it's, if I can speak frankly, I was very, I was worried about doing the holiday edition because it's hard to fuck with people's holidays, frankly. That's the truth. Like, nobody wants to hear bad things about the holidays that they love celebrating. But at the same time, I really felt that the story deserved telling. And yes, we had already done an indigenous story with the Navajo in Arizona, but indigenous people in the Americas are not a monolith. Cherokees are different from Navajo, which are different from Lenape, which are different from Wampanoag. And so, I didn't want to just paint them all with one brush. It's always going to be a story about the environment because most Native Americans are so attached to the environment. That's what we've found in our research. But because we were doing this holiday edition, it was the only way to include Thanksgiving. And I had also made a promise to myself that I would try to always include an Indigenous community if it, could be done. And so this was perfect for it. It was a very hard episode to do. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of legwork on this one and just talking to the community, and it wasn't perfect. I would do some things differently if I could. I always want to go back and edit. I always want to go back and tinker. I'm never finished. I'm never satisfied with stuff. There's a point at which my partner David just have to say, like, okay, the editor has to move on to another job. Like, this is it now. Like, you really have to lock this episode. I'm very involved also in like color correction and weird stuff like that, because I want to make sure that the food looks right. And sometimes like things like raw meat or shrimp can look funky, when they're on camera. So it's just like, I'm very OCD and it's a new thing for me. So I've got all these tools that I'm also playing with. But in the Wampanoag story, those people have such heart. And the fact that that mother and daughter literally revived a dead language is extraordinary to me. It was just extraordinary. And, in my textbooks, I had one page about those Indians, those Native Americans, and that shouldn't be. Like, I am giving myself the education through Taste the Nation that I should have had in elementary and middle school from the US public school system. The US public school system did a generation and a half of us, at least, I'm just speaking for my generation, I can't speak for others, but a real disservice. I think we should look our past crimes in the face. I think we should deal with them. We should talk about them. It's going to be painful. Anytime you pull a thorn out of your finger, it is very painful. But if you don't pull that thorn out of your finger, the wound gets bigger, it festers, it gets infected. It's way worse a problem. So I think that like once this country starts to look its past in the face and, really say out loud, Thomas Jefferson had slaves. He probably raped Sally Hemings, all of these things. Yes, he did so many great things. Yes, our founding fathers, constructed this document called the Constitution, which is an extraordinary document, but they also were all white male slave owners. Like, that's just a fact that we need to say. And that's not critical race theory to me. That's just the facts, and I wish I had learned about all these tribes, because it's interesting. And I think all these people that made America over generations and generations what it is today should be part of the conversation. It doesn't make us weaker. It doesn't make our children feel worse. It makes them more informed. I don't see what we're afraid of. I think kids are capable of having two contradictory thoughts in their head at once if you just explain it in language that's appropriate. I've been so pleased because a lot of teachers have reached out to me and they've actually shown different episodes, both the one in Arizona and the one in Massachusetts, the Wampanoag that you've referenced, in their classes. Everything from Jose Andres showing it to his American University class a couple years ago in the first season, to just like middle school teachers reaching out to me just on social media saying, I made my class watch this episode because it was the best thing that was out there in half an hour that I could show to them, rather than a whole big lesson plan that they would tune out, listening to. I think our country would benefit from looking at a lot of these painful things. I think in the short term, it will be painful, but it will actually lead to real long-term healing. And that's what I hope. We can't control our past, but we can control our future. And part of controlling our future and making it better than our past is acknowledging the things we don't want to repeat in our past.
Thank you. I mean, it's also just great to hear that it is a continued story, and realizing that it's not just like one umbrella Indigenous community, but all unique, different, communities and nations throughout what we now call the US. So,
Right.
I'm very excited to see kind of news stories and different communities that come to light from, indigenous communities who originally are within all of US, or what we call
Yeah, I mean,
USA.
the Wampanoag have been here for 12,000 years, and everyone else has only been here for 500 years. And they are the keepers of the land. They have been tending to this land for all these thousands of years. So we owe them a really big debt of thanks. Under their watch, the country thrived. It's only recently that we've done all this environmental damage, and so maybe they have some things to teach us.
No, it's true. And with that, I want to say, we're touching on like how you are going deeper into these stories. And, something that I noticed with some of the other episodes is kind of the seeing more, I feel like, intergenerational experiences. I think with Noche Buena, and we see Mika Leon, like with her own family, and seeing kind of their diverging political views, and, in the K-Town episode, just different generations kind of in conflict, and like how they want to carry on Korean traditions. And I wondered if that was like an intentional choice, or are you starting to see that organically more happen as like the show progresses?
I love aunties. I love aunties, and I love grannies, and I love old people. I do, because, I grew up in a multi-generational home in India, and then I was a latchkey kid with my mom in New York, who was a single parent. So I had this very divergent sort of, split screen childhood, where I would go home to India for the summers and certain school years, and I would have 10 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my grandparents, my uncles and aunts and cousins, as well as my grandparents. Then I would come to New York, and we lived in a tiny studio apartment that was just me and my mom, and I had a key around my neck, and I let myself in. I would help cook dinner because she didn't get home from the hospital until 6. She was a nurse. So for me, having older people and younger people in the same frame feels like real life. And I think each generation is a different identity. If you talk to my mom, she has a completely different experience as an immigrant, because she came here as an adult. She's been here since the 70s. She still has a really thick Indian accent, and I find it funny. But I've been here since I was 4, but I went back to India 25% of each school year this summer. So I'm very tied to my Indian heritage. I still maintain an apartment in South India where, my aunt lives. And I, if you talk to me and I said my name was Jane Smith, you'd believe me, until the phone rang and I picked it up, and I'd be talking to a relative, and immediately my Indian accent comes on, like within 2 minutes. Sounds pretentious, but that's what happens. But I think it's real. Like, I know so many of my friends that I grew up with who code switch very easily, and I think all human beings do that. And I wanted to see that. I wanted to see how people interact with their grandparents or their moms and extended family, but then also see how they are when they go drinking and karaokeing with their friends, because I want to get as multifaceted and nuanced an impression of these people and their lives and community as I can, because nobody is all good or bad. Nobody is just one way all the time. And so I want to breathe as much texture and information and context as I can into every episode, with food, with music, with dancing, with slang, with wardrobe, with whatever I am given. I'm always hungry for more.
I mean, it's great. I just have to say, like, I appreciate it, because I know for me personally, seeing that, I'm like, oh, okay. So I get to see someone else's family dynamic play out the same way I'm having those conversations at home.
That's when you really see how people are, how they are
Yeah.
with their families, because there's often no filter. I always say, like, sometimes it's good to have a participant, but the minute you have a participant with their mom, you see a completely different side of them. So I usually like to talk to people individually because I think they can be guarded also with someone they know in their own life. You know, it's almost easier to tell a stranger something sometimes, and then bring in the family member. And you see all these wonderful things happening in their dynamic that are really informative and fun. And then hopefully people watching at home can say like, oh yeah, okay, so their aunt is annoying too, or their, you know, dad picks on them too.
Sweet. I mean, and with that, okay, I have a very challenging question. And maybe you can't answer this, but what was the most memorable food moment or experience you had during the holiday edition?
During the holiday edition, honestly, that clam bake that you see us put together, I don't know if the cameras actually could capture the size of it. Like, we hauled in so many trash bags of seaweed that were still damp and heavy. And, you know, each of the seaweed pods has like these little bubbles, air bubbles. So as those pop with the steam and they heat up, the smell was amazing. And I have never ever been to a clam bake like that. And at first we were going to do it in the beach, and then we just decided it was too windy and everything. So we did it at that beautiful center where they all come. And I have to tell you, like, it was so much hard work to bring all of that, and the smell of the ocean that just steamed through the lobsters and the clams and everything. And the food was so pure. Like, there was no salt added, there was no chilies, there was nothing. It was just pure lobster, pure clams, pure corn, whatever it was. And I've never done that. Like, I'm somebody who wrote an encyclopedia about spices and herbs. You know, I love to season food. I love to add sumac and chilies and all that stuff. And here was just pure, unadulterated food. And it didn't need any salt. It was just so much the thing that you were eating, if that makes sense. You felt like you were having the purest form of this lobster or clam or whatever.
I mean, that sounds incredibly beautiful. And it feels like you really are pausing and taking a moment to reconnect with the earth, you know?
I mean, that is one thing that the indigenous communities here really can teach us. And, you know, I loved my time in Massachusetts. I also love my time in Arizona. That day I spent cooking pack rat in the Arizona desert. Like, I have never done that. I'm a city girl. I always said if you left me in the country, I would die in 4 hours, you know. But that day was such a magical experience. I will never forget the day I spent with Twyla Casador in my life. It just was otherworldly. And I'm blessed, you know, I'm really lucky I get to have those experiences. I'm really, really, really privileged that these people are willing to let me into their homes, in their lives. And some of their homes are really humble, you know, like, we're all on top of each other. Sometimes half the crew just waits in the car because there's just physically no space. I like to keep my crew really lean and mean, but it's hard. You know, you want to make sure you light them well. You want to, you know, a lot of times we're just using natural light, but sometimes we'll bring a light in, but all that takes somebody to do that, you know, and it's always hard. I'm always torn between how much to manipulate the situation, also so I show them in their best light. I've had so many times when I've been interviewed for things and I've looked back at the program or whatever, I'm like, oh, I look horrible, I sound dumb, you know, all that stuff that I, as a professional person in media, feel. Imagine how that person feels who's never been in front of the camera. And I always want to mitigate that as much as I can for them. I want them, when they see the final product of the show, I want them to feel proud of that. I want them to show it to all their family members. That's why, like, it really preys on me what we're doing with these participants, how we're doing it, and how we're using that footage. And again, you know, I'm nervous, I'm learning. It took me so long to get this show even green lit. There was a point where, like, I think 6 or 7 networks said no. And I was just like, okay, maybe nobody wants to watch this. Maybe I'm the only one who wants to watch this, because I will admit I don't have mainstream taste. Like, I will stay up until 2 a.m. and watch a documentary on the history of paint, but like Love is Blind, I don't know what that is, except for what my daughter tells me it is. And then I have to tell her she's not allowed to watch it, but like so now that I have this show, I'm going to squeeze every opportunity I can out of it while they let me still keep making it. There's so many stories. We're, like I said, knee deep in production right now. And for me, Taste the Nation is a political show. It's a human political show. It's not like wonky, but it's the politics that count. It's the politics that affect the daily lives of Americans who are going about their business and making a better life for themselves. And in doing so, are also building this country every single day. And that's why I wanted to do it, because I wasn't seeing those stories. I was seeing the same stories.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, and also seeing how their cultures start to seep out and be an effect and influence other cultures, And with that, what do you hope to highlight? I know the production is happening for your new season. So what do you hope to highlight in it? And how do you hope Taste the Nation evolves?
Well, right now we're looking at, some policies, some food policies that make it really hard for certain communities in this country to thrive. The deck is not stacked in their favor. It's actually stacked in corporate America's favor. And we're trying to look at that in one particular community. We're also looking at the refugee situation, in light of the Afghan, those charter planes that came last August, and we all saw them. So we'll be with the Afghan community in DC, and just looking at different stories to try to, map out another series of 10 episodes where you have all different kinds of stories. I was worried that, we had this refugee story and then we have that refugee story, and they're both really compelling. And it was like, okay, but we need to balance that out with some other communities. And then I was looking at Greek or Italian or Ukrainian or whatever. And then I'm like, wait, is that too many like white people in our series? And I'm like, no, because they are immigrants, right? We don't think of Western Europeans as immigrants, but you know what? They all are immigrants, unless you are a First People member or an indigenous community, you too are an immigrant. So it's just balancing I have to look at the series or the season as a whole and see if it has balance. And also, am I canvassing enough different corners of the country? Is it all in the East Coast? Is it all in the South? So things like that we're trying to work out. Also, my schedule is a nightmare, because I have to hurry and get this show done before I go film Top Chef. And I want to have some kind of summer with my kid, and I've been gone. I'm a single parent too. So, I've been gone a lot from home with these two shows. So, I have to balance that out. So it's all of those things that there are a lot of moving parts.
Well, I just want to thank you again. Do you have any final thoughts or any final words you'd like to share with the Doc NYC community?
I just hope that people, if they have watched Taste the Nation and they enjoy it, that they spread the word. We are a very small company that makes this documentary, and it's hard to compete with some of the other things that get nominated for awards or Emmys or other things like that. And so if anyone's an Academy member, I just ask you to please show Taste the Nation some love so that Hulu keeps it on for many seasons, because I feel like I'm just getting started and I have so many stories to tell, and I just hope I get to keep doing my job, really, and learning and growing in it.
And I have to say, I hope you do too. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Padma.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
Great. And we just want to thank our Doc NYC Spring Showcase community again, and also our partner Hulu. And thank you again, Padma, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Take care.